Yo, this is the Ancient Texan. Oh, I'm glad to see we passed something on climate change. But what we passed from an engineering viewpoint, from a market viewpoint, doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. What we're really doing is we're giving incentives for people to buy electric vehicles. That seems to be the big push. Get $7,500 credit that the government gives you, and it's probably a tax credit, so that's probably, it's good for people that pay a lot of taxes. But it's also the government picking the technology that's going to win. And that is usually done much better by the market. Like they're putting in 500,000 charging stations. Good. But that's picking battery charging stations over battery swapping stations. And most of the bill concentrates on the end of the market. Like they're going to provide R&D money for making batteries, and they're doing incentives for buying electric cars. Although they did have a cap in there that once you sell 200,000 cars, like Tesla, that you couldn't get an incentive. And I think that number's been bumped up. But again, if the motive is to get people into electric, then if they're buying from the most popular car maker, they're not going to be eligible. I don't know if that provision's been knocked out. I've heard it's modified. I don't know the details. But one thing that I think they're failing to address is all this EV, electric vehicle technology takes are a lot of new chemicals and metals. Guess who controls those? Who makes 95% of the batteries right at the moment? China. Who controls rare earth market that you need for your batteries in these good electric motors? China. Who controls the lightweight metal magnesium? China. Who has the biggest car market in the world? China. Who started a decade before us? China. Securing, not concentrating on the tail end of the market, but concentrating on the raw materials that make all this possible. U.S. company just sold the big cobalt deposit in Congo. So who's turning down new mines? U.S. Now part of the bill is, and I think we have Manchin to think of, that when we open leasing properties in the U.S., they're going to be able to put mineral mines and oil and gas mines, which actually I agree with, because we need to be getting rid of coal. That should be our number one goal. And if you go from coal to natural gas, you've just cut, your CO2 emissions in half. And of course, the other big problem with this whole bill is we act like if we solve it in the U.S., we've solved the global warming. Nope. Now, admittedly, we put out more, but for our standard of living, we actually put out less. So it's we can actually afford to go green, as we've discussed before. But a lot of the world can't afford to go green. And as long as they're building coal plants, it's going to be hard for the industrialized and prosperous parts of the world to actually make a dent on CO2. China and India are both still building coal power plants. So is Germany, because they got rid of nuclear. And I think there's some money in there for small nuclear power plants, which is good. Give Biden credit for seeing that that's necessary. But the general public, I don't think they still think that nuclear is necessary. So we chose to use all carrots in the new climate bill, no sticks, i.e. carbon tax. Which means when you do carrots, it means you pick the winners. You don't let the market pick it. And it's very easy to pick winners that are just duds. Like there's money in there for hydrogen, because hydrogen's been the darling of the R&D world forever. But it has not gone over well. Honda had a Clarity, which is kind of plug-in hybrid I use. They had a plug-in hybrid that used hydrogen that didn't go over well, not even in California, because you have to get public to buy off on something for it to be successful. And just because the people at the top in their great wisdom decide what's going to be popular and how things are going to work, that doesn't mean the consumer. So that's the biggest problem with the new climate bill. They assume, A, that they're smart in picking the winners in this brand new world we're entering, and ignore the fact that there might be something brand new behind somebody's making in a garage right now that's not going to be part of the party because we picked the winners. Part 2, it doesn't really deal with the fact that this is a global problem and not just inside our borders. In part 3, they don't address the fact that the chemicals for this evolution to green are not controlled or even available to the U.S. in many cases. Certainly not at the ramped up quantities we're talking about right now. So they need to be making, what they need to have in there is making it possible to get a mine permitted in the United States. Right now it takes probably about, from the time you say you want to do something till you finish, maybe 8 years. It's a long damn time. You need to cut that down to a couple of years. You need to have one agency in charge of handling that permitting process, and then they go behind the scenes and go to all the zillion bureaucratic people, and they need to have a schedule that they have to adhere to. If you don't address the permitting problem, then you don't address us getting access to the chemicals, minerals, raw materials that we need to build electric vehicles. Our supply will be limited, and it can be cut off by the people that control those chemicals and raw materials. So we still have a long way to go before we start realizing that we need green in my backyard, where we take control of our green economy from the ground to the finished product. We don't have to need to control all of it. But a reasonable goal might be to have control of 50% of the supply chain. Not like the 10-20% that we have now in most materials. Some materials it's like 5%, like rare earths. I don't know the exact number, but it's very low. Still got a little COVID cough here after a month. Also I have an ear infection, so I can't hear you. But otherwise, Ancient Texan's doing pretty good, and I hope you are too. Thanks for coming by, and hope you're a little bit smarter about climate change and what we need to do to address it. Yeah, we're in the minority. Maybe in 10 years somebody will pull this out and say, wow, why didn't we think of that? Anyway, have a good one. Namaste.